But honestly, that's not such a big deal, right? Now, even though these tweaks have jazzed things up for fans and viewers, some drivers aren't exactly happy about the whole thing. Here's what Max Verstappen had to say. "I don't like it. This weekend format doesn't quite do it for me. I favor the single practice that comes after straight-up qualifying. It might actually suit me better. What bothers me is the lack of the usual thrill, and it looks like Lando Norris feels the same way." In an interview, he reflected on the old days when the focus was solely on nailing qualifying and then heading into the race. Norris prefers the pressure build-up from qualifying and then quickly transitioning into the race without any distractions. Not everyone despises sprint races though. The Mercedes drivers have actually been pretty upbeat about the 2023 season's new format. And it's not just them. Valtteri Bottas from Alfa Romeo and Esteban Ocon from Alpine are also on the positive side of things. But the thing is, there's still room for these sprint races to change in the seasons to come. Now, here's an interesting notion that's gaining steam, the idea of a sprint championship. David Croft shared his 2 cents on the Sky F1 podcast. He's all for keeping sprint in the mix, but he suggests letting it stand on its own. He said, "I think the sprint concept is good. I like it, but I don't like it being part of the World Championship. I like 2 separate World Championships." Crofty was suggesting having a dedicated sprint day on a Friday instead of Saturday. In this scenario, there would be a sprint qualifying session, then the sprint race with maybe a 20-minute warm-up in the morning. That way, there will be an interesting day of sprints on the Friday, a practice session followed by qualifying on Saturday, and then the race on Sunday. So in Croft's hypothetical scenario, these would be 2 separate World Championships. Why does this matter? Well, it keeps the traditional Saturday-Sunday groove intact while still giving drivers a single practice round on Saturday ahead of qualifying. Now, wait for it, there's more. The idea of ditching Friday's practice sessions has been brought up a couple of times this season. George Russell has made it clear that they don't need as much practice time as they usually get on a regular race weekend. But Croft's idea goes even further. He's also thought about lightening the load for the drivers during the sprint weekend. If all the drivers don't want to run in the sprint championship, that's fine. There are enough reserve drivers who do. Maybe that's a good way of getting the reserve drivers involved in that. So commercially, that's what I look at. Speaking of reserve drivers, this format could actually give rookie drivers some more F1 experience. Sure, rookies tend to be a bit more crash-prone compared to seasoned pros, and if they end up causing mayhem on the track, it could throw off the entire race weekend for the established F1 drivers. But a sprint championship could help bridge the gap between those up-and-coming junior drivers and their dreams of F1 stardom. Back in the good old days, a team could take a couple of days at a track like Silverstone to let a promising rookie get behind the wheel and gain some experience. But times have changed, and now their evaluation mostly hinges on how they perform in lower-level racing like F2 and F3. That's why a separate sprint championship could give them a chance. They deserve to be on the track. We could have Red Bull's powerhouse junior drivers go head-to-head with Aston Martin's very own Stoffel Van Dorn. But here's where it gets a little complicated. There's a bit of an overlap among the reserve drivers. Take Mercedes for instance. They're sharing a lineup of drivers that includes Mick Schumacher, Felipe Drugovich, and Stoffel Van Dorn, among others. And guess what? Most teams have just one reserve driver. Imagine a separate championship featuring 10 cars, packed with drivers who've outgrown F2 but still have that F1 spark. You see, there's a bit of a gap in the current system. More F2 champions are popping up than there are chances to shine in Formula 1. Sure, they could try their luck in IndyCar or Formula E, but for some reason, they're not taking that plunge. Instead, they're hanging around as simulator and test drivers for F1 teams, just hoping for a shot if one of the main drivers suddenly falls ill. Now here's the kicker. This means that 20 full-time drivers won't have to juggle 4 intense sessions over a weekend, and 10 other drivers would finally get their time in the spotlight. It sounds perfect, right? But let's not brush aside the hurdles. Not many Formula 1 fans would be jumping for joy over a 10-car race that doesn't affect the World Championship standings or feature their favorite drivers. And there are other problems as well, like if a driver crashes the car before Saturday's race, how do we manage the engine usage, and what if parts need a last-minute swap? Who gets slapped with a grid penalty in such a twisty situation? Creating a separate championship for reserve drivers in Formula 1 cars could be great, but the nuts and bolts of making it work might be a little too complicated and costly. But who knows? maybe this idea will take shape and these reserve drivers will finally get more chances. And if you want to know more about what's going on the track, make sure to like and subscribe to The Grid Report for the latest F1 updates.